This module of Inventor will include instruction on how to create an assembly out of pre-existing parts. It will include instruction on how to import these pre-existing parts into an assembly file. That will be Chapter 7 Module A, and then Chapter 7 Module B will include instruction on how to edit the parts and animate the parts. So first we'll start by moving our cursor to the upper left portion of the screen if you have Inventor already open. We'll left click on New. The Create New File dialog box comes up. We'll left click on English. And up to this point we've used standard Inventor parts. We've created parts, we've created drawings, and now we're going to create an assembly, standard Inventor assembly. So I'm going to left click on that, and then I'll move this up, and we'll left click on Create. And then once Inventor gets everything loaded up, you'll be in what's known as the assembly area. And if you'll notice at the top of the screen, the tools are all tools you would use to modify and manipulate existing parts. So we'll move our cursor to the upper left portion of the screen, and we'll left click on Place, and we'll left click. The Place Component dialog box will come up, and so you will need to locate the parts that were created in Module 6. So I will go find those. And then we'll bring in the 5 parts that were created in the last module, starting with the piston case. So I'm going to left click on piston case, left click on Open, and then attached to the cursor is going to be the piston case. So I'm going to wheel it out a little bit here, and I'm going to left click one time, and then still attached to the cursor is yet another piston case. If we needed more than one, we could left click, left click, left click, and we'd have numerous piston cases. We don't need any more piston cases, so I'm going to hit the escape key. Then we'll go through the same procedure to import the rest of the parts. So left click on Place. I'm going to scroll down. Now we can bring in any of the parts in any order. Connecting rod, left click on Open. Attached to the cursor is going to be the connecting rod. And like I say, if we needed multiple connecting rods, we would just simply left click for as many connecting rods as we needed. So we only need one, so I'm going to hit the escape key. Hit Place again. Scroll down, hit the crankshaft, hit Open, left click, hit Escape, Place, scroll down, piston, Open, left click, hit Escape, Place, scroll down, wrist pin, Open, left click, Escape. So now we have all our parts, and if we want to move or rotate any of the individual parts, we left click on the free rotate icon, and then we left click on the part we want to rotate. In this case, we're going to rotate the piston around so that the bottom is facing out the bottom of the case. So I move my cursor over the entire part. When it becomes highlighted, I left click one time, and now I just hold the left mouse button down and I can rotate just that individual part. Then I right click, left click on OK. To move something, if you left click on Move, you can move the part around, but you really don't even need to use the free move command. You can just move your cursor over it when it becomes highlighted. Just left click holding the left mouse button down and just drag it around. Now I'm going to use the rotate command and basically rotate the entire assembly up on its side. And then we'll right click, left click on OK. So the first thing we're going to do is move our cursor up to the constrain icon. We'll left click one time. The constrain dialog box comes up. Move our cursor over the piston. When the center of the piston appears, center line, we left click once. We'll move it into the center of the cylinder. When the center line appears, we left click once. You'll hear that pop. And left click on Apply and then Cancel. And the piston is now constrained. The center of that piston is constrained on the center of that cylinder. Now you'll notice that the piston case moves when I try and slide the piston back and forth. That's because the piston case is not grounded. And the way I know that is if I look over here in the tree, there's no little push pin next to the piston case. So I'm going to move my cursor over the piston case text. I'm going to right click one time. The pop-up menu appears. I'm going to go down here, and next to grounded there's no check mark, which means it's not grounded. So I'm going to left click once. The little push pin appears. Now the piston case won't move, and when I try and move it, I get the little push pin hooked to the cursor. So if I right click and then go down and look, there's a check next to grounded, which means that the piston case is grounded. So we want the case grounded. All the other parts need to be ungrounded. So now when I move the piston in and out of the piston case, it doesn't move. So now we're ready to install the rest of the parts. So the next thing is we'll install the connecting rod. We'll move our cursor to the upper left portion of the screen, left click on constraint. We'll move the cursor inside the hole that's in the middle of the piston, the wrist pin hole. When that center line appears, we'll left click once. I'm going to zoom in here a little bit, and I'm going to move my cursor inside this hole on the connecting rod. And once that center line appears, I'm going to left click once, and Inventor will pop that into place. I'm going to left click on apply and then cancel. Then we'll move the connecting rod out just a little bit, and then we'll left click on the rotate command, and we'll rotate in here, and you can see that it floats around inside there, and we need to fix that. So we'll left click on rotate. Oops, I got it into the edit mode, which we're going to cover that later. So we'll hit return, and like I say, we'll deal with all this later. So for right now, we're going to left click on constrain again, except I'm going to left click out in the workspace so I don't have that surface selected. Left click on constrain, left click on the side of the connecting rod. I'm going to left click on the free orbit command. I'm going to right click, left click on OK. I'm going to zoom in here and left click on that particular surface. Then I'm going to come over here to offset, and I'm going to enter 0.25, and then left click on OK. And then we'll scroll out, and now that connecting rod doesn't move back and forth. So we'll left click in the workspace, left click on free orbit, rotate the part around, right click, left click on OK. Next thing, we'll insert the wrist pin into the wrist pin hole. So I'm going to drag the piston down a little bit, left click out in the workspace to make sure don't have anything pre-selected. I'm going to left click on constrain, and I'll move my cursor to the wrist pin. Once it becomes highlighted, we'll left click once. Then I'm going to move it into the center of the piston. As soon as that center line appears, I'm going to left click once. Then I'm going to left click on apply, cancel. And we need to slide that in there, but we got to put a constraint on there to keep it from doing that. So we'll left click on constrain one more time. This time we're going to hit the flush command. The left click on basically the face of the wrist pin, and then the face of the connecting rod. And then we're going to enter minus 0.7825, and then we'll left click on OK. And now that pin won't move in and out of there at all. We'll move this over a little bit. Now I'm going to rotate this crankshaft around so it is facing the right way. So I'm going to left click in the workspace first, left click on free rotate, left click on the crankshaft. I'm going to move it around, and we want it facing like that. Then I'll right click, left click on OK. Then we'll move our cursor up to constrain, left click once. I'm going to move my cursor over the crankshaft. When the center line appears, we'll left click one time, move it into the inside of the crankshaft or the connecting rod journal. Once it snaps into place, I'm going to left click on apply and then cancel. Now you can see that the connecting rod floats in and out. So we have two more constraints to do. We're going to constrain this pin into this hole, and then we'll do a flush constraint. So I'll move my cursor up to constrain, left click once. I'm going to move my cursor along this area. When I see that center line appear, I'm going to left click one time. When I see a center line inside the piston case hole, I'm going to left click once. Left click on apply, then cancel. So now you can see that the connecting rod is in the right place. We just got to have a flush constraint to keep it flush with the connecting rod. So I'm going to zoom in here. And then we'll left click out in the workspace. Left click on constrain. Left click on flush. We want this surface and this surface to be flush. We'll left click on apply, cancel, and we'll scroll it out. And now if you take your cursor and rotate the crankshaft around, you should have a working piston assembly. Now there are three inherent problems built into this assembly, which we will use the edit command in the next module, but I'll give you a hint of what they are. First, the connecting rod is too short. If you zoom in here, you can see it's actually hitting the side of the piston there. So we obviously can't have that. The second problem is pretty obvious. The piston comes clear out of the hole. Can't have that. And then third, this pin doesn't even go through the piston case itself. So these are all things that were built into this module on purpose so that we can correct them in the next module. So that concludes this first module on constraining parts together in an assembly.